Okay, so that's the problem. So what's been happening? Well, it's back to the same idea again. Identify the different health states that might be relevant, and then construct a model to predict how long patients will spend in different health states. And then you're going to run your model for existing treatments, run your model with the new treatment, and you're going to compare them. And so almost all the drugs I've just shown you in the last 3 slides have been evaluated using a model which distinguishes progression-free and progressed disease. Some of them have additional progression-free states. For example, progression-free on treatment, progression-free off treatment. The models have all to date been something called a Petition survival model. I'll explain that to you in a second. And they've had a wide range of cycles. So 1 week up to 1 month, and time horizon 5, 6 years up to 25 years. So the cycle is that period at which you take a snapshot. Where are the patients just now? And then 1 week later, where are they? Now in this condition, things can move fast enough that in 1 week, things change. There are other conditions, rheumatoid arthritis or something, where a weekly cycle would just be too short. Nothing would be happening. So this is the model. Now, I think on your handout, rather importantly, you're missing an arrow from here to here. I can only apologize. That would be a rather strange model. So the idea again is, so we start our patients progression-free, and over time they could stay progression-free, that's this arrow here, or they could progress or possibly die. If they progress, for a period of time they can remain progressed and then in due course die. And that really simple model has been used in about 80% of the evaluations of those drugs I showed you. The only variations have really been to distinguish additional progression-free states. As I say, one where you're still on treatment, another where you've maybe stopped treatment but you haven't progressed. The loop on death is just reminding us all that, well, it's one view of the world. When you're dead, you're dead. This actually did cause me some concern with respect to my Thai PhD student, that she was going out to collect preferences in a predominantly Buddhist country, although the southern part is Muslim. Because of course, from my primitive grasp of Buddhism, there is a belief in other lives. And if you really believe there's other lives, maybe death doesn't hold quite the same meaning to you. You know, it's not such a thing to be avoided, perhaps. But anyway, her respondents, Buddhist or otherwise, interestingly, we didn't collect information on whether they were Buddhist or not. In hindsight, I kind of wish we had, but the respondents in Thailand answered the questions in much the same way people in other countries answer the questions. But yes, sorry, that's a sidetrack. Dead is dead. You don't have to put this in, but quite often people do. Yes, sorry.
Because in the intervention study used for the untreated, the study used for the treated, so I'm not sure whether we can include the newly diagnosed or refractory that's in the...
All right. This basic model has been the one that's been used again and again, depending on what line of treatment you're considering introducing the drug. That will determine whether the patients you start with are untreated, or they've had previous treatments. So if you're looking at it, say, as a second line treatment, that would imply they've already had some form of treatment which they either couldn't tolerate or they've progressed, their disease has continued to progress. Effectively you're running a different model. So if you're asking, should we look at pembrolizumab second line or first line, or can we do both? You can do them both, but it'd have to be separate models. You can't sort of put them all together. Does that? Yeah, because I mean, I think I didn't spend any time on it, but if we go back, in this one, oops, sorry. This was pembrolizumab after chemo, and this was pembrolizumab in untreated disease. And so they're separate models because the data is going to be different, the transition probabilities are going to be different.
I see. Okay. Sorry, what is partition?
Oh, we're just coming to that.
Survival model.
We're coming to that.
Please.
No? I'm not meant to finish for another 16 minutes. So that's a simple three-state model. They've all been petition survival models, and these are quite an interesting form of modeling, which is a bit like a Markov model, but almost simpler to operationalize. So, if you think of the basic Markov model, it could look like this, and we'd have to calculate a transition. Every arrow is a transition. I agree we don't need one here because it's a certainty that you stay here. So you could calculate transitions and run a model rather similar to the hepatitis C one I had up before. However, in recent years, for cancer therapies, and certainly for all of these non-small cell lung cancer, they've used something called a petition survival model. And what you do in a petition survival model is at different points in time, so it could be every week or every month, you ask of our patients how many are dead, how many are still progression free, and how many have progressed disease. So you're getting the same information about how much time patients spend in the different health states, but you're getting to it, if you like, more directly rather than calculating transition probability. Now, to do this, you need essentially survival curves. The dashed line here is the progression-free survival curve. The solid line is overall survival. Now, if you have those two bits of information, it allows you, for any point in time, to work out what proportion of the people you started with have died, because it's this bit here. What proportion are progression-free? I should do it on the line here. Progression-free. And the difference between progression-free and overall survival is progressed disease. Because in this model, you're either progression-free, progressed, or dead. And so if we know two of them, we always know the third. And that's a petition survival model. They've proved very popular in recent years. If I had more time, I'd love to sort of work out when it happened and why it happened, that we moved from Markov modeling to these petition survival models. But I don't have time. But I would be interested. Okay, so it's giving you exactly the same information in the end. How much time patients spend in different health states, because it's the time in the different health states that allows you to calculate the QALYs, and it allows you to calculate the costs. But to get there, we have to extrapolate survival, we have to model survival, because of course trials typically never go on long enough. And trials, when a trial ends, there's a lot of patients still alive. And that's good news in one sense, but the problem is we don't know when they would die. I mean, in an ideal world, almost, the trial would go on until everybody was dead, then you'd know when everybody died. But of course, that's even with these cancers, that's impractical, because there's going to be a few people that live a long time. And so you have to extrapolate progression-free survival, you have to extrapolate overall survival. And that is quite a challenge sometimes. But it's important to do it to distinguish between these progression-free and progressed health states, because the costs will vary. For a lot of these drugs, you stop the treatment on progression. And so you need to work out how long people are progression-free and therefore still getting treatment. It's also the case that the health state utility value, the score or the weight being attached to progressed disease, is lower than the weight attached to progression-free. People are healthier while they're progression-free. Now, there's a lot of challenges in extrapolating progression-free survival, and these come up time and time again. The first one is this. Typically, particularly with new drugs, you may only have one trial. The trial that was done to get regulatory approval from the FDA or the EMA. The trial participants may be rather different from the patients you're about to give the drug to, if you approve it. If you approve it for routine practice, your patients in a routine practice may be a bit different from your patients in the trial. Typically, in routine practice, patients are older, and typically they may have had more pre-treatment and failed it. They may also have more comorbidities. And so one challenge you've got is trying to predict what will happen, if you like, to real patients or routine patients from using trial data. That's the first one. The second one is the one I was just emphasizing previously, that trials have limited duration, and so you have to try and predict the future from the trial, what happens next. And that's difficult because there's different ways of doing it, and the different methods give you different answers. Another problem, I'll give one example of this, I hope, is you're trying to identify a treatment effect. So what is the effect of giving, say, pembrolizumab compared to current therapy? And the problem in identifying that effect is something called treatment switching. Patients under the current therapy or in the control arm, if they progress, may well switch to pembrolizumab. And so essentially, that muddies the water because you're no longer getting a very clear picture of the treatment effect. There's things you can do, but it's another problem. A final problem, as if there weren't enough, is often you haven't got trial data comparing your treatments of interest. So you might be interested in comparing A with B, but you've only got data A with C and B with C. And so you have to make an indirect treatment comparison. I'll give an example of that in a second. Right, extrapolation of survival. This is a lecture in itself. There's lots of different methods, but essentially you're fitting different statistical functions. Some of the most widely used: exponential, gamma, Gompertz, log logistic, log normal, Weibull. Increasingly being used something called fractional polynomials, and occasionally spline models. Now, you don't need to know all these. All you need to know is they'll give different answers. And then you have to think about the circumstance in which this evidence is being presented. A manufacturer who wants to sell their drug is producing evidence about how well their drug works. Now, depending on which method they use, they can make their drug look better or worse. And so this is a challenge, because you then, as a committee, have to decide, have they used an appropriate model, or are they trying to, in some way, was going to use the word manipulated, I don't know if that's the right word. Are they in some way making their drug look better than it perhaps really is? Everything starts usually with the Kaplan-Meier data. I don't know if you've maybe come across Kaplan-Meier data. That's what's usually reported in a trial. And then you're trying to fit curves to those data. There's a lot of issues. Are there proportional hazards or not? We just can't go there.